Is The Road the most depressing book ever written? It's hard to argue when confronted with the apocalypse, death, fear, hunger, suicide, and even cannibals. From the very first page, it's clear that the emotional currency of The Road is a patchwork of foreboding horror, the anxiety of survival, and the bleakness of memory. If the animal brains of the characters can somehow cope with one of those afflictions, the others just rush in to top up the mind with darkness, a black water torture. The past, present and future, mind, body and spirit, the landscape, life and light, all withering to dust. Yeah, that's pretty depressing. As a fan of speculative and post-apocalyptic literature, I bloody love The End of the World. I admit that there is a sense of familiarity. I've seen it all before. So what's so special about this book? Cormac McCarthy, for starters, not just because it's his story, his vision, but the way he tells it. His stylistic choices have a direct effect on the reading experience. The dead elephant in the room is the wallowing in grammatical chaos, the lack of quotation marks, and the middle finger to a traditional structure. This is no country for old chapter numbers. Some say it's just too jarring and badly written. They are wrong. Some say it's sheer pretension to applaud the lack of standards. I say it's brilliant and it's essential for the level of immersion that he produces. By making us pay attention to the actual words on the page, he sucks us right in, presenting the text in small chunks, rarely more than 15 lines at a time. Feels like we're being pummeled over and over again. For most writers, this would be an inconsequential gimmick, but for McCarthy, he backs it up with sheer poetry. Now we get into the real heart of The Road. If we're looking right here for the most depressing book ever written, then we're gonna have to sweep away all that beautiful prose. It's vivid, it's raw, it's brutal, but somehow it's also enchanting and warm. And best of all, the plot is so threadbare, it allows the writing an abundance of space and it takes control of the book. Just like The Man and the Boy, the reader is a passenger of Cormac McCarthy's vision.
The ashes of the late world carried on the bleak and temporal winds to and fro in the void, carried forth and scattered and carried forth again. Everything uncoupled from its shoring, unsupported in the ashen air, sustained by a breath, trembling and brief. If only my heart were stone.
How about that plot? Brilliantly, the devil is in the lack of detail. It doesn't matter what, but something has rendered the earth a burnt, ash-covered husk. The few survivors are scattered amongst the filth. A man and his son, a 10-year-old boy born into this horrific world, are travelling through the remains of the North American landscape. They're moving south to the coast, but why? Because it's warmer? Because that destination has some sort of hope? The uncomfortable feeling for me is that the situation is so desperate that the man just wants to do something, anything. There is danger and death all around, but doing nothing means certain failure. The end. So they hit the road, or what's left of it. Two grubby, skinny, pathetic figures traversing a scar on the land that was once the lifeblood of a thriving civilization. Most post-apocalyptic books are either about the event itself, what caused the catastrophe, or the effort to rebuild afterwards. Lots of reflection and extreme social commentary. The Road delicately builds a world where these debates just don't count. The apocalypse has already happened, and you can mourn the billions dead in your own time. This is a story about two people that love each other, possibly the last scrap of compassion left in the entire world, and even that may soon be extinguished. They have a gun and 2 bullets. One for the man, one for the boy. The implication being that suicide is preferable to capture. McCarthy doesn't hold back here. He plants an image of rape and cannibalism in our minds, as if we needed off-camera horror on top of all of this. The book just meanders through this broken terrain. We encounter the inevitable horror, the bad guys, and the destination of no concrete hope. The man slowly dying while desperately trying to teach his son how to survive on his own. The boy questions the logic and argues for suicide because that's what worked for his mother.
He walked out in the grey light and stood, and he saw for a brief moment the absolute truth of the world, the cold, relentless circling of the interstate Earth. Darkness implacable, the blind dogs of the sun in their running, the crushing black vacuum of the universe. And somewhere, 2 hunted animals, trembling like ground foxes in their cover. Borrowed time and borrowed world and borrowed eyes with which to sorrow it.
I think it could have been a lot worse. Maybe not the situation itself, but the enduring feeling when you finish the book. Cormac McCarthy was very aware that the reader wanted something to cling on to, and I think he gives us just a tiny little ray of light. There is love in the road, that bomb-proof urge to protect a child, and the connection between a father and a son. They are each other's entire universe. Without that, the book is just sadistic. The concept of carrying the fire. The man teaches the boy that regardless of the desperate situation, good moral decisions will maintain hope for the future. And there must be other people like that in the world. And the ending, it is ambiguous, but I believe the boy is going to be okay. In the short term at least, I think somebody is going to protect him. We can't see beyond that horizon of the story, but it does feel slightly hopeful. Imagine if the book just ended with death, or the boy coughing up blood, or the boy all alone except for the body of the man. Imagine if all that was left dangling was varying degrees of horror. So is this the most depressing book ever written? I don't think so, because I'm left with a feeling of relief that I'm not in that story. Like listening to the blues, I'm euphoric that it's happening to somebody else. It's not a bleak picture of the world that we currently live in. Dystopian fiction haunts us more profoundly because it's more likely that we'll live that reality. If the road happens tomorrow, the chances are you'll just be burnt up in the global inferno. Result, but it is maybe the bleakest execution of its type. It's not simply raw horror. The road pulls you down far deeper and pushes much darker buttons. It's not death metal, it's Radiohead. But this is definitely the most depressing video I've ever made. Right, that's a wrap. Pub?